Hey everyone, and welcome to today's explainer. We are jumping right in and unpacking the invisible engine running basically every modern organization today, building data to drive decisions. We're going to bypass the basic textbook definitions and break down the core architecture of data warehousing, business intelligence, and the actual mechanics that make the whole shebang happen.
Okay, let's dive into this. Imagine a massive server switchboard, just completely tangled up in a chaotic web of Ethernet cables. Some are labeled, some aren't, they're crossing all over each other. It's a mess, right? Well, this is the perfect conceptual anchor for the absolute headache businesses face right now: messy, disconnected, raw data. Data flows in from everywhere, and in its raw state, it looks exactly like this tangle. You literally cannot make smart business decisions or train reliable analytics models if your information is tied up in knots like that. Incompatible data types and missing values, they'll crash your analytics pipelines every single time.
So here is our roadmap for the explainer. First, we'll look at the need for ETL. Then we'll walk step by step through the data journey, extracting the data, transforming it, loading it into a warehouse, and finally, driving real business intelligence. All right, kicking things off with part 1, the need for ETL, order out of chaos. To actually solve that tangled cable problem we just talked about, organizations rely on ETL. That stands for extract, transform, and load. You can kind of think of ETL like a highly efficient manufacturing plant. The raw, messy data from all over the business gets dropped off at the factory door. It goes through this rigorous, highly controlled assembly line makeover, and then gets securely stored as a polished, ready-to-use product inside a central data warehouse. This central repository is the ultimate goal here. It provides a single, validated source of truth for the entire business. Which brings us to the first step of that assembly line, part 2, extract, gathering the data. So at this starting line, extract, our primary goal is actually pretty simple in theory, though, technically complex to pull off. We literally just need to get the data from multiple, completely disparate sources. We got to gather up all the raw materials before any refinement can even start. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer variety of these sources. We aren't just, pulling from one neatly organized server. No way. We're extracting from operational databases, flat files, spreadsheets, cloud apps, and web APIs. We're even pulling in real-time streaming data and IoT sensors. And the kicker? Every single one of these sources speaks a totally different language and uses completely different schema formats. Moving right along to part 3, transform, cleaning it up. So, right into the middle of our core process here, transform. If extract was the intake door, transform is the absolute critical machinery right on the factory floor. Here is exactly what happens in the transform phase. We clean, we validate, and we convert the data. Remember those messy, tangled cables? If we just dumped all that raw, mismatched stuff from spreadsheets and sensors directly into our warehouse, it would be a total disaster. You'd have duplicate records, missing values, and incompatible formats just crashing your queries left and right. So this transformation phase acts as the ultimate sorting and refining line. We standardize the formats, filter out all the garbage, and just make absolutely sure every piece of information is uniform and reliable before it ever hits the shelves. And that takes us to part 4, load, building the warehouse. We have officially reached the final gear in our core acronym. We extracted, we transformed, and now we load. This is the process of finally putting our finished goods onto the warehouse shelves. We are loading the clean, validated data into the central data warehouse. But actually, scratch that. It's not always just a simple data dump. A lot of times, businesses use staging areas. These are kind of like temporary holding zones where the data sits while final consistency checks are done before the really big move. And to keep things running efficiently over time, we use something called incremental loading. Instead of, reloading the entire massive database every single night from scratch, incremental loading uses change data capture to just load the brand new or updated data. It's a real game changer for efficiency. Finally, we arrive at the big payoff in part 5, driving business intelligence. And this brilliantly illustrates the entire ecosystem for us. On the intake side, we've got our messy, completely diverse data sources. Then, right in the middle, our gears are turning. Extract, transform, load. Once those diverse sources are funneled through that ETL process, cleaned all the way up, and securely deposited into the large central data warehouse, boom, it unlocks incredibly powerful outputs on the other end. The whole system just flows perfectly from absolute chaos to crystal clarity. So the absolutely crucial point is this. Clean data allows you to actually execute. Once that pristine data is sitting securely in the warehouse, business intelligence tools can finally hook into it. Now you can generate beautifully accurate reports and real-time dashboards, you can run deep analytics, you can do data mining to find hidden trends, and you can even feed this high-quality, perfectly structured data into advanced machine learning algorithms. Seriously, none of these cutting-edge BI outputs are even possible without all that foundational ETL work that came before them.
Now, before we wrap this explainer up, I do want to briefly touch on a modern evolution of this whole concept, ETL versus ELT. Notice those swapped letters there? Traditional ETL transforms the data before it enters the warehouse. But with the massive rise of modern cloud environments, we sometimes use ELT, extract, load, and then transform. Because, cloud data warehouses are now so incredibly powerful and can scale compute practically endlessly, they can take the raw data first and then just do the heavy lifting of transforming it right there inside the warehouse itself. It's the exact same vital steps, just in a slightly different order optimized for the cloud. Which brings us to a perfect summary quote from our source material. Good data fuels great insights. ETL makes it possible. Literally hit the nail on the head. Without a reliable process to gather and clean your information, any insights you think you have are basically built on a shaky foundation. ETL really is the quiet, behind-the-scenes hero, making modern business intelligence a reality.
So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. Think back to that first mental image of the tangled wires. How much messy data is hiding in your organization's cables right now? Are your big decisions being driven by a chaotic tangle of spreadsheets? Or a beautifully structured data warehouse? Because understanding ETL is the very first step toward untangling those cables and truly building data to drive decisions. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.